You could feel the tension in the room before she even started speaking. No warm-up, no soft introduction, just straight into it. The kind of moment where everyone watching knows something big is about to happen. And then it dropped. A statement so blunt, so direct, it instantly shifted the energy in the room. She looked right at him and essentially said what nobody else had been willing to say out loud. Not behind closed doors. Not in interviews. Right there, in front of everyone. And just like that, the entire hearing changed direction.
There's been so much today, and I truly don't know where to start. So I'm just going to make sure that we start off with a few facts. So a couple of facts that we need to make clear for everyone is that, number one, Director Christopher Wray, when he was appointed to be the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump. Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining, yet we are supposed to believe that you are the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you are already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe. I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues. And frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided that I would maybe do it in a different way. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay, so here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people. And even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody. And then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap. Because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice, or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem, the one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
The time of the gentlelady has expired. If the gentleman would like to respond to any of that. Well, I mean, I'll respond. Kash Patel, as I said when I introduced him, public defender, former prosecutor, top staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, Deputy Director of National Intelligence with the National Security Council, Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense, and FBI Director. I think that's a pretty good resume for the guy who's now running the top law enforcement agency in our country, and we've seen all the stats that he's given to the committee on how much better they're doing at getting the bad guys than the previous guy was doing. With that, I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I think you're witnessing some auditions, clickbait auditions for the Academy Award for my Democratic colleagues. We'll see how they fare as they're on MSNBC later on today. Do you care, before I launch into my line of questioning, to respond to Ms. Crockett from Texas on that very elaborate and theatric display?
Here's what I've learned in my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission. We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us. And so all I care about is that we are capturing more child predators than ever before, taking more drugs off the streets than ever before, that we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history. That are facts that you cannot dispute. But you can come at me all you want. I don't care.
Thank you, Director, for that, and we appreciate your service. We appreciate the results speak for themselves, I think, pretty plainly, and your commitment not only to results, but to transparency, so we do appreciate that.
Because this wasn't just another routine exchange. This was something different. This was personal, political, and explosive all at the same time. The kind of moment that doesn't just stay inside the room. It spills out, goes viral, and gets picked apart from every angle online. But to understand why that moment hit so hard, you have to look at what led up to it. This wasn't just about one comment or one accusation. The stakes were already sky high before anyone even opened their mouth. You're talking about leadership at one of the most powerful law enforcement agencies in the country. The kind of position where every decision matters, where every move is watched, and where trust isn't optional. It's everything. And that's exactly where the tension started. Because when questions about leadership come up, especially at that level, people aren't just looking for confidence. They're looking for credibility. They're looking for experience. They want to know that the person in charge has actually been in the trenches, understands the system from the inside, and knows how to handle pressure when things go wrong. And that's where the criticism began to build. There's been a lot of talk, some of it quiet, some of it very loud, about whether the person sitting in that chair actually fits that role. Supporters argue that experience doesn't always have to follow the traditional path. That leadership can come from different backgrounds, different skill sets, different perspectives. But critics? They see it completely differently. They look at the same situation and see gaps. Big ones. They question whether skipping the usual path creates blind spots. Whether being close to power is the same thing as being prepared to lead something this serious. And once that question is in the air, it doesn't just go away. It lingers. It grows. And eventually, someone brings it straight to the surface. That's exactly what happened next. She didn't ease into it. She didn't dance around the topic or try to soften the edges. She went straight for it, laying out her argument in a way that was impossible to ignore. The kind of delivery that makes everyone else in the room sit a little straighter, pay a little more attention, and realize this isn't going to be a typical back and forth. The core of her argument was simple, but powerful. How does someone lead an agency like that without ever actually working inside it? It's the kind of question that sounds obvious once it's said out loud. And maybe that's why it hit so hard. Because it forced everyone listening to confront something they might have been thinking but hadn't heard stated so directly. And she didn't stop there. She pushed further, bringing up concerns about safety, about trust, about whether people actually feel protected under this leadership. And that's where things took an even more serious turn. Because now it wasn't just about qualifications on paper. Now it was about real-world consequences. She pointed to something that's been quietly building in the background for a while. Reports of threats, fear, and rising tension. The kind of situations that don't always make headlines every day, but create a constant sense of unease for the people experiencing them. And when she brought that into the conversation, it changed the tone completely. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This wasn't political talking points. This was about whether people feel safe. And that's a question that hits differently. Because no matter where someone stands politically, that's something everyone understands. Everyone relates to. Everyone pays attention to. She described situations where fear had become part of daily life. Where threats weren't just words. They were serious enough to change how people lived, how they moved, how they protected themselves. And the underlying question was clear, even when she didn't say it directly. If all of this is happening, where's the response? Where's the action? Where's the leadership? And that's the moment where the pressure really started to build. Because now the focus wasn't just on the past or on qualifications. It was on the present, on what's happening right now, and whether the person in charge is actually addressing it. The room got quieter. The energy shifted again. You could almost feel people waiting to see how this was going to be answered. Because at that point, there was no easy way out. And then came the response. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't defensive in the way some people expected. Instead, it came across as calm, controlled, confident, but also dismissive. The message was clear. Results speak louder than criticism. He focused on numbers, on achievements, on outcomes that he claimed showed progress. More arrests, more enforcement, better performance compared to before. On the surface, it sounded strong. Confident leadership, clear direction, measurable success. But something about it didn't fully land. Because while the claims were bold, there wasn't much behind them in that moment. No detailed breakdown. No evidence presented right there. Just statements delivered with certainty. And that created a gap. A gap between confidence and proof. And people noticed. Because in a setting like that, especially under pressure, details matter. Specifics matter. And when they're missing, even strong statements can feel incomplete. But what happened next might have been even more telling than the response itself. Because instead of continuing to defend his own position, something unusual happened. Another voice stepped in. And instead of addressing the criticism directly, they started listing qualifications. Titles, roles, experience from different areas. Almost like they were filling in the blanks. And whether intentional or not, that moment stood out. Because it raised a subtle but important question. Why did someone else feel the need to step in and reinforce that? Why wasn't it handled directly? It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was noticeable. And sometimes, those quieter moments say more than the loud ones. Then came a smaller moment that quickly took on a life of its own. A slip, a phrasing issue, something minor in isolation, but in a high-pressure setting like that, it stood out more than it normally would. And in today's world, those moments don't stay small. They get clipped, shared, replayed. They become part of the narrative. Because once something goes viral, it's not just about what happened. It's about how people interpret it. And suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about policy or leadership anymore. It was about perception, about how this entire exchange looked to the outside world. And that's where things really started to shift. Because when perception changes, everything changes. Supporters pointed to the confidence, the focus on results, the refusal to engage in what they saw as political attacks. Critics pointed to the lack of direct answers, the reliance on broad claims, and the moments that felt like deflection. Two completely different interpretations of the same situation. And both sides felt like they had the stronger argument. That's what made it so compelling. Because it wasn't clear-cut. It wasn't one-sided. It was messy, complicated, open to interpretation. And that's exactly the kind of situation that keeps people watching. Because everyone wants to decide for themselves. Everyone wants to pick a side, or at least understand what really happened. And that brings us to the bigger picture. Because moments like this aren't just about one hearing or one exchange. They're about something larger. About trust. About leadership? About what people expect from those in power? Is it about experience? Is it about results? Is it about confidence? Or is it something else entirely? There's no easy answer. And maybe that's the point. Because the more you look at it, the more complicated it becomes. And the more questions it raises. Questions that don't get answered in a single hearing. Questions that don't disappear after one viral moment. They stick around. They shape how people see things moving forward. And that's why moments like this matter. Not just because of what was said, but because of what they reveal. About the people involved. About the system. About the expectations that come with power. And now it's your turn to weigh in. Because after everything that happened, after all the arguments, all the reactions, all the back and forth, how would you describe that performance in one word? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to see what you come up with. And if you made it this far, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakdown. There's a lot more coming, and trust me, you're going to want to see what happens next.